Now next we have Dr. Michele Scott, Executive Vice Dean and CEO of Weempower Partnerships. Michele is a domestic and global instructor in business supply chain management, sustainable development, Six Sigma, and entrepreneurship. She has 25 years of corporate and Wall Street banking experience, where she excelled and contributed through client technology implementation, TQM, Six Sigma, and project management and operations. Please put your hands together for our keynote speaker, Dr. Michele Scott, who will shed light on the topic Education for All, Creating Accessible Classrooms.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Well, I'm excited about being here. This has been a fantastic 2 days so far, and I'm hoping that you have used this opportunity to basically be part of a classroom. And many of you have been up here speaking and in panel discussions, etc., and you have been in a classroom. You see, a classroom does not have the boundaries that we believe they have. They're not the four walls that we are used to teaching in. Or over the last several years, it's not Zoom, yes? Or it's not just using WebEx or something for our classroom. And okay. But anyway, we have to look beyond the traditional definitions we have of classroom. I must say that when I was asked to go ahead and speak today about accessibility of the classrooms, I just thought, really? Are we just talking about making sure we have the internet available in our homes or in the classroom, the cameras ready, the PPTs ready, etc.? Is that what we're talking about? And I said, really, I think we're looking at the accessibility of learning, which can be done in many different venues. And I've had the pleasure of learning and teaching in multiple different venues. So today I'm going to talk to you about accessibility in the 21st century, okay? And many of us have also talked about just, looking at future generations. I'd ask that you just dispel that rumor. We're looking at all generations. None of us are surplus. Yes? My aunt passed away in July, and she had Alzheimer's disease. She was 91 years old. And while she was in the assisted living, they had a little exercise, and they asked the people there, the residents there, so tell us about a time when it was the prime of your life. My aunt said, right now. Very excited, right now. Okay? And so she was extremely excited about continuing her life, continuing learning. I don't have transitions in it. Okay? Doing its own thing. Doesn't sound like me. Okay, let me go back. Sorry, folks. I don't have transitions, but anyway. Okay, we're going to keep on going here. Okay, but my aunt thought she was in the prime of her life at age 91. She was continuing to learn. I was over in China, and she wanted to know everything about what was going on in China. Yes? Okay, so I was teaching her about China. I was sending videos and links to her about China. Okay? She was continuing to learn. I was trying to make from China learning accessible to my aunt. Okay? All right? So you see, the classrooms that we have don't have ages to them. Learning is not age limited, all right? And we have to remember that as educators, as learners. So when we talk about learning and we talk about who is learning, we have to realize that many generations, all of us, continue to have the opportunity to learn. We have to also make that learning accessible to many different ages, many different people, many different races, many different styles of learning, okay? So one of the things that we've done since we've had COVID is we've looked to see how can we continue to have this learning happening in our homes. So we looked at it from a perspective of making sure that everyone had internet access. Yes? And we know the children and the people in the underserved areas didn't have this internet access. So we poured money into that, made sure they had internet access. We looked to see who has a laptop. My little niece, and she had her, tablet. How many of you have children who are in that age range of maybe about 2 to maybe about 7 years old, and you have to keep them engaged? So if you're going somewhere with them, taking them out somewhere, you got to bring the tablet with you. Yes? Well, at this time, we had to make sure that we had a laptop. So my little niece, she was 5 years old, just beginning kindergarten. She needed to have a laptop. So she had her desktop set up there, okay, with her laptop. And my sister is a teacher, so my sister was teaching from home, and my niece was ready and set and ready to go, okay? But not everyone had this opportunity. So we need to make sure that everyone, okay, had an opportunity to learn. Everyone had a laptop at home, etc. If you were in that age range where you were compelled, basically, to learn. So we made sure that we had the facilities in place, the materials in place, and tried to get those methods in place to make sure that people can continue to learn throughout this time frame, looking at COVID-19, all right? But some of the things that we did not look at, the things that we didn't pay too much attention to, was the human side of this, all right? We don't have the interactions of the classroom that we normally have. So students were missing that part. We don't have the teacher walking around. And I love to walk around. I'd be out there, just walking up and down the aisles while I'm teaching to make sure the students had me there, okay? And they felt good with that presence. They got used to it. Dr. Scott's going to be here. She's going to ask me a question. She's going to look in my face. She's going to ask me if I have a comment or something like that. Thank you. Okay. I'm doing. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, thank you for your patience there. So, I'm a Six Sigma black belt and used to using these different types of tools. And so, first of all, looking at the problems that we had to solve, again, with COVID-19 and making sure that we had everything we needed to have that classroom access at home. We looked more so at the top three, the materials, the methods, and the machines and facilities, etc., making sure we had them in place. But what we failed to look at as much was really the people, the interactions we normally have, the environment, the learning environment, yes? Of course, my niece wanted to still have that tablet there where she can continue to play games while she's supposed to be learning. Yes? Okay? But making sure that environment was proper. TV wasn't on. We're not basically paying attention to 10 different things, right? And we can do that as instructors as well. We had that issue while we were at home and trying to cook at the same time, yes? And also measuring success. Now, when we talk about, again, looking at the materials and looking at the machinery, the facilities, etc., and having those in place, some ways that we measure success, you would have the mayor of your town say, we spent this many millions of dollars making sure internet was in place for our homes. But was that an adequate measure of success? A lot of times we do that instead of looking at what's happening socially, instead of looking at what's happening as far as our learning skills improving, our information, our knowledge improving, we're looking at the wrong success factors of how much money we've spent in these various different areas. So it's extremely important to identify the correct success factors. So when we look at providing accessible learning, I believe we need to look at something as simple as A, B, C, D, E, F, G's, and making sure we're covering them and whatever else we can add to them, all right? To understand that we are accessible. Learning is accessible to that audience that we're trying to teach, trying to engage with, okay? So, first of all, making sure there's an audience awareness. You need to be aware of what I'm trying to get across to you, what I'm trying to teach. Yes? And I need to be aware of you, who you are. So who are you? I know a little bit about you listening to your fireside chat, meeting you the other day. Definitely with the meditation, I said, oh yes. I remember when I was teaching a group of students, and actually it was not really students. These are young men who were re-entry, and they were 19 to 21-year-olds. Sitting there at the Urban League and trying to work with them was not the same as it was trying to work with my students over at Rutgers University. Yes? So I had to learn who they were, get to where they live. Yes? Learn what they've been through. Learn what they're expecting. What do they need in order to move forward? I had to adapt. I found myself as an adjunct professor. Any of you adjunct professors, or have you been an adjunct professor? You feel like sometimes, the semester rolls around and you're talking to these universities. Do you have a course for me to teach? You get the crumbs off the table. Yeah, and you get these courses to teach. Well, one semester I was teaching in 7 different places in one day. 7 different universities. Then I'd go over to the Urban League, and I'm working with these young men over there. Even at the 7 different universities, there were such differences, okay, in the audiences, such differences in what they were expecting to learn, such differences in their learning styles, and I had to adapt. But I also had to remain consistent to who I was. And that's one thing that people will tell you, maybe about yourselves, but definitely I know I've heard it about me. Whether I am teaching in France or teaching in China or teaching in the Urban League or teaching at a community college in an urban area, I'm consistent. I'm authentic. But I definitely adapt to where they are. if I want to make learning accessible to them. Yes? One of the things that I do when I walk into any classroom, and it's basically to say that you are all leaders. Then I have some of my students look at me like I'm crazy, like, are you kidding me, Dr. Scott? Leaders? Middle schoolers, teaching them entrepreneurship. You are all leaders. But we've never done this before. You've done something, and I'm going to find out what it is. It's my job to empower you. Yes? I look at B's. As I mentioned earlier, boundaryless. But also I want to talk about building bridges. Folks, and ladies, maybe, we spent a lot of time, and I'm from Wall Street banking, and every time I turned around, people were talking to me about breaking the glass ceiling, becoming the managing director. Yes? So you know about breaking that glass ceiling. Breaking the glass ceiling just gives you a bunch of broken glass on the floor, folks. I really hope that we will move on to building bridges. Being more collective, more collaborative, is not about breaking glass ceilings, because that gives you a bunch of broken pieces that you have to put back together again. I think it's very important that we think more about building those bridges. Definitely becoming more collective. Creating a classroom setting, a learning atmosphere that is more collective, more willing to work together, more harmonious. I'm going to talk about diversibility in a few seconds, so I'm going to move on a little bit more quickly here. The E's, looking at engagement. If you're aware of your classroom, you're aware of the people that you're working with in this learning environment, you are engaging them. It took me a while to learn how to use Zoom. Now, Zoom, it's got some tools in there that, very useful to you that you can use to get your class engaged, get the people engaged. I learned about it by just going through this webinar one time, and I had this guy who was teaching and everything and leading this webinar. He was jumping up and down. He was all over the place. He'd tell us to stand up every 10 minutes. He also started using this polling. And I said, this is interesting. So starting to use polling throughout my teaching while I was using Zoom got people engaged. They were answering questions. I could get feedback from them. I would know whether they're getting it or not, or what are they getting? What do they think about this? What are their perspectives? So engagement, very important. Ecosystem, and we'll talk about that more in a few seconds. But again, understanding that we are not doing this alone. Do you know that United States, according to Hofstede, we are probably the highest rated as far as individualism is concerned? And more of the world is moving towards collectivism, working together. Yes? And so that's something that we definitely need to consider. How do we get to build these relationships? Do you know who is in your ecosystem? What city are you from? Anyone? What city are you in? Do you know those people in the government there? Do you know the nonprofit agencies there that you would work with? Yes? Do you know the administrators in education there? Yeah? Very important that you understand who's in that ecosystem you have. I talked about feedback a little bit earlier, a few seconds ago, but definitely getting the feedback is extremely important to me. Doing the polling is very important. I heard someone say the other day that sometimes you just don't want to know what people think about you. You know, you get to the end of the semester and you get these evaluations, and if you're going for tenure track, you really want to pay attention to those evaluations. But for me, if I have one outlier out of 183 students, I had 183 students in one class in the spring semester. If I have one outlier, I wish I knew who it was. Why? Not so I can go over there and say, who the heck are you? No. So I can find out what is there that I can change. You see, I want to make sure each person in that classroom, each person I'm trying to reach out to is learning in this environment. I mentioned a little bit earlier about generations, that we cannot limit ourselves to thinking about just the next generation. You are the next generation. You are the next generation. Yes, we should be concerned with our children, but none of us are in this surplus generation where we do not add value, where we cannot learn. It's very important for us to realize that we are that generation. 20 years ago, I would not have thought about being in China and teaching. 20 years ago, I was in Wall Street banking. I would go in stores and, you know, for me, I went to the mall with a couple of people last night. We were looking at price tags. We were at the outlet mall and everything. But, you know, I basically did not look at price tags when I was working in Wall Street banking. I didn't look at generics. Yes? So there was a place where I was, and I was not thinking about going around the world and doing anything. I didn't think I could have that type of influence and impact. Yes? But I realized that I can have that influence and impact on thousands of students from different countries, but also I am learning as well. I tell the students also, listen, I'm learning more from you than you learn from me any day. Look at all of you. And that's the attitude that we have to create a climate of learning in our classrooms. Relationships, folks, and I was talking to someone the other day, and we tell people to build relationships, but it's not as easy for everyone. It's something that has to be taught. Again, something that has to be taught using just the collectivity, making sure people understand how to build bridges in different situations. Talked about ecosystem, and I'm going to move quickly now. Okay? Working between, not just on. I work with entrepreneurs, and we spend times, and many of you have entrepreneurs that we just work in our business instead of working on our business. We have to do the same thing as far as our teaching and our classrooms, etc. Not just work in our classrooms, but between the different classrooms, between the different industries. Yes? Between the different countries. That ecosystem, I challenge you to learn who is out there. Maybe you do not have the same skill sets. We shouldn't have the same skill sets. We should be able to collaborate and pull those skill sets together from the different places, yes, to accomplish basically the same goals. We have the same basic goals. We have the same basic values. We have different skill sets to make it happen. Diversibility. Definitely looking at this definition, we've talked about diversity. We talked about inclusion in our panel discussion the other day, and many of you have talked about that. We need to make sure, folks, that we understand the differences and the value of the differences that people bring, organizations, businesses, bring to the table to help us to achieve our goals of learning and learning accessibility. We should remove the barriers, and sometimes if the barrier is yourself or myself, we need to have the guts to step out of the way if we are not willing to change and adapt. If you're not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, if you start to frame, okay, what you're doing, what you're teaching around the Sustainable Development Goals, you will be successful in learning, not just in the United States, not just in your country, but every country. We're all looking to achieve these same goals. All right, I'm going to end here. I'm sorry. But we have the old adage, we can lead a horse to water, but we cannot make the horse drink. I'd ask that you throw that out. I've used this in thinking about teaching and learning. Yes? But people are not horses. If you feed them, if you create, okay, an area, a classroom, an opportunity for people to learn, they will come. They are hungry. They will eat. I'm going to end there and say thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to the rest of the conference, and really appreciate your listening. Thank you.